Hello, friends! I'm here today to try and raise some awareness on an organization that I would love for you to learn about. So today we're going to learn a bit about the court system in America, about mass incarceration, and about a fantastic organization called the Innocence Project. So the Innocence Project is a nonprofit organization that works to free the alarming number of innocent people being wrongfully imprisoned and bring about an end to mass incarceration. Today, we are going to be joined by an incredible man who survived injustice and incarceration starting back when he was just a teenager. The Innocence Project worked tirelessly on his case. He's agreed to join us today and educate us a bit on the Innocence Project, the work that they do, and the system that they're trying to change. So everyone, please welcome Mr. Hugh Burton. Hello, Mr. Burton. Thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
So just to get started, just first off, in your own words, what is your story?
My story. Wow. Well, my story is a lot of things. But I could give you the starting and how it all started. My story pretty much starts on January 3rd, 1989. I was a sophomore in high school in the Bronx. I lived with my parents. My mom was a registered nurse. My dad was an independent contractor. On the day of January 3rd, it was my first day back to school after the holiday break, and my mom was just starting a 2-week vacation. My dad was out of the country at the time visiting his mom. The day started out as normal as any other day. My mom got me up. I got ready for school. I ate, and she was sitting on the couch. And the last thing I remember saying to her was that I was going to do a little bit better in school because I started to lose interest in school altogether. So we laughed about that, and I left. I went to school, came back maybe about 2:30 or so that afternoon, and I noticed that her car wasn't in the driveway. So as I'm coming in the house, I'm thinking, well, she's probably out running errands or something like that. She should be back soon. So as I'm coming in, we lived on the second floor of this 3-family home. And I'm coming up the stairs and I can hear the telephone in the apartment where we live. I can hear it ringing. So I open the door, I grab the telephone, and it's a girlfriend of mine at the time who said, well, did I want to come by? I said, great, I could come by. And by the time I come back, my mom should be home. So I turned right around, closed the door, went back out. I got back about 5:30 or so. And when I got back at 5:30, I noticed the car was still gone. So I went in the house, I took off my things, and now this is the first time I'm really inside of the apartment walking through it. So I'm walking towards where my bedroom is. And I noticed that my parents' bedroom was open. So I went into the bedroom and I found my mom there. She had been stabbed to death. So immediately I'm crying, I'm screaming, and I had enough sense to say, let me call the police. So I went to call the police. But when I went to grab the telephone, the base and the cord of the phone, it wasn't there. Not like now we have cell phones where everything was a regular phone. So the cord was taken out of there and they'd use it to bind her wrist. I ran out of that room and ran into the hallway and used the phone in the hallway, and I called the police from there. I couldn't stay inside of the house, so I left. I went outside, waited for the police to come. They had gotten there fairly quickly. Everything was just like a blur after that. There's just so much traffic in and out of the house, and I'm still crying, and I'm trying to describe what I just saw. I told them my whereabouts for that day, and they asked me, was anything, out of the ordinary? I said, well, a car is gone. So they brought me from there, took me to the precinct. They spoke to me again. They brought me back to the house to see if anything was out of the ordinary, and asked me if I had any place to stay. They brought me to my godmother's house, who lived in Mount Vernon. When I got there, my dad was already notified, so he was on his way back to the States. I stayed in the bed from the 3rd. I couldn't move. I couldn't eat. I couldn't even sleep. So I just laid there. Finally, on the 5th, they called back. They called my godmother, and they said that they wanted to bring me down for a polygraph test. Um, I didn't want to get out of the bed. I didn't really even have the energy to do much of anything. Um, but wanting to know what happened to my mom, I said, okay, I'll go. And they said, okay, we'll be bringing him right back. So I got down to the precinct, and they asked me again the same thing that they asked me on the 3rd. I told them the same thing again, maybe about an hour, hour and a half or so into this, maybe even a little bit more. The interview took a turn, and at this point now they're accusing me. They're saying we have evidence that says you committed this crime. I start crying immediately. You know, asking to see my dad, and this goes on for a while. I'm telling them I didn't do it, but the more that I'm telling them that I didn't commit this crime, I didn't do this, the more they're telling me you did, you did. And finally, they told me, they said, well, we know where you at you were at your girlfriend's house. But what, do you know that you're older than she is? And I'm like, okay, well, I'm thinking, hey, 2 years or so. And they said, well, you know what that is? That constitutes statutory rape. And if you don't tell us that you committed this crime, not only are you going to go to jail for killing your mother, we're going to put you in jail for statutory rape as well. But if you do tell us that you committed this, because we know that this was an accident, if you tell us that you committed this, we'll do it where your dad can come and pick you up from family court, and you won't have to go to Rikers Island for this statutory rape. Them knowing that I had never been arrested before, I had never been questioned by police before, just green to all of this stuff. They knew that they were able to tell me these things and make me believe these things. And knowing the state of mind that I was in at the time, they knew that they could pretty much get me to say whatever they wanted me to say. Inside that interrogation room, they made me feel as if I couldn't leave. And the only way that I was going to be able to leave that room was if I told them what they wanted to hear. So finally, when they got me to the point where I said, okay, well, I just want to get out of the room. I just want to get past this. They got me to make this elaborate confession that absolutely made no sense, and had me sign it and had me do a videotape confession. I was arrested, charged with second-degree murder, with killing my mom. I fought, my dad and I, we fought. And after 3 years, close to 3 years, we lost at trial. And in 1991, I was sentenced to 15 to life. Still appealing, still fighting. We weren't getting anywhere, but we weren't giving up. But as years would go on, they would tell us that we didn't have any issues that were had any merit that they could review. So I was kind of stuck with doing the time, but I never stopped writing to people and never stopped reaching out. As years would go on, my father would get, would age and he would get sick, and just the pressures of all of this stuff were on him. He ended up passing in 2005. I was released in 2009 after 20 years and 8 months. Still, it's bittersweet I was released, but for me, it was more has to be done. I hadn't been exonerated. I had been writing to attorneys throughout my time there, and I had a group of attorneys who were still committed to trying to open this case up and get to the truth. It took us 10 years, and finally in 2019, January 24th, I was exonerated. So what they knew maybe about a week, less than a week after it happened, it took us 30 years to correct the error. So that's pretty much been the last 30 years in a nutshell.
Wow. So how did you first come into contact with the Innocence Project, and then how did they help you and get involved?
So as I said, I was writing a lot of organizations. At the time, there were a lot of different organizations. If you had claims of innocence, they would help you. At the time, the Innocence Project had not been around long when I first started reaching out, and there were a lot of different organizations, as I said. So I would just write everybody.
Mhm.
And I remember one time the Innocence Project, they wrote me back, and I was so happy when they wrote back. But they were saying that they only deal with cases that had issues of DNA.
Mm.
So I was like, oh wow, okay. But someone in intake, I don't know, something about my letter, I don't know what it was. They were like, but we can pass this off to another law clinic that deals with confessions from adolescents, because it seems like that's the issue here.
Mhm.
And thankfully that person passed that off to Northwestern University, Steve Drizzen. And they got in contact with me, along with Rutgers Law Clinic over in Newark, New Jersey, and with Laura Cohen. And together, we started trying to piece together this whole, the whole story, the truth.
Mhm.
And they told me, they said, look, we know you're going to the parole board. If you're still committed to fighting when you get out, you call us, you let us know.
Mhm.
And I had gotten out, I made that parole board, and the first call I made was to them, and I said, okay, well, let's fight. This is bittersweet. Everybody that I knew when I left, they're either gone or, just moved on with their life. So the only thing I have is this fight now. So um, that set off, like I said, the next 10 years. 2016, they did everything that they could. They got all of the evidence that they could, and they had to reach back out to the Innocence Project to ask for assistance,
Mhm.
because we were we hit a wall.
Yeah.
We knew what we knew, but we were at a wall. And the Innocence Project, they got on board, and it's like things really started to pick up, and a lot of the things that we knew, they were able to help us just really put this together. And they became so much invested in the case emotionally, and I think that's what made it real. So that's how they got involved, and that's how we still have our relationship now.
Sure. Sure. So, okay, so you were wrongfully incarcerated for 19 years and
Hmm.
then released on parole in 2009. And then it still wasn't until 2019 that your conviction was officially vacated. And for anybody that doesn't know, vacated means that basically the court dismissed the case and you were officially exonerated.
Right.
So that's longer than I've been alive. I mean, when you were finally connected with the Innocence Project, were you hopeful about what they'd be able to do?
um, you know, I was hopeful in the truth. I was hopeful in the truth coming to light. I just needed someone to say, "Yo, please just take a look at this." I'm sure if you take a look at it, you will see it exactly the same way I'm seeing it.
Mhm.
So that was the thing that I went into with whomever that I wrote to. I always went into it with that. Only thing I have is the truth.
Sure.
So yeah.
And what was your experience like working with your legal team over there?
It was great. One of the highlights for me, people would think it's a lot of the great attorneys, although that is a highlight. I think for me, watching law students,
Hmm.
because remember, this was a 10-year ordeal.
Hmm.
So Rutgers had law students that they would give the case. They would choose a couple of students and give them the case.
Hmm.
And they would go over it. And I guess it was part of their, I don't know if it was extra credit or just something to get their feet wet in a real live case.
Hmm.
And it was always good to hear their views. They were very young. Some of them weren't even alive when this happened to me.
Hmm.
And to look at their views, the research that they did, that was the highlight for me, because we would come into the city and we would meet and talk about what they discovered and what they were going to take back to their law professor. um, and each class would pick up on what the last class
Hmm.
had, and it was great just watching them. And some have gone on into private practices, and I'm glad I still have relationships with them. Some are went on into the DA's office. Some have gone into different things, and it's like, wow, these were just students
Yeah.
who were taking a look at this case. So that's one of the highlights for
No, that's incredible. Um, so I do want to talk about real quick. So a large part of your case involved manipulative interrogation techniques through which you were coerced into a false confession. This is
me.
a serious malpractice which has negatively affected so many cases. But it might be unfamiliar to a lot of our viewers, as it certainly was to me up until recently. So could you tell us a little bit about what this is and how this really affected your case specifically?
Um, what it is, it's sometimes they'll get, especially if you're innocent,
Mm-hmm.
they'll have you in there. Like for me, what they did was their assessment of the case. They kind of tried to feed me what their assessment of the facts were, and just kept drilling it and making me feel as if you're not going anywhere until you tell us what we want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
There was no physical abuse, but just the mental. It
Uh-huh.
just, just that, and knowing that I just came and witnessed one of the most horrible things I think any person should witness in their life, and I, was unable to process that. So all of these things, they use all of these coercive techniques to push me into signing this false confession.
Um, so I think a lot of people understand that the American court system is just deeply flawed, but they don't really know how or why. After experiencing such an incredibly intense example of its failings, why do you think it is that the American court system fails so many Americans?
Mm, wow. Um, well, the court system, prisons, um, they are an entity of business
Mm.
in this country. This is part of the reason why our numbers are so disproportionate to other countries around the world in terms of the amount of people in which we incarcerate. When it comes to Black people in this country, um, we have been marginalized like so much with regards to uh, the court system and things like that. I believe that um, these things stem almost as far back as slavery goes, because as soon as slavery was, we were emancipated from slavery, there were laws enacted to lock Black people up, put them right back into prison, and to make slavery legal once you got them there. These things have never changed. And this is a large portion of the reason why things are the way in which they are now.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, how have you stayed involved with the Innocence Project over the years?
doing what I'm doing now, just helping to raise awareness that there are a lot of innocent people, that there may be some who may never get the opportunity to sit here and have a conversation, to, make sure that I make people aware that they have work to do, not just us. But the reason why these things are allowed to happen is because we sit by idly and we don't say anything. So the work that I do is just to try to bring awareness to that, wherever I can go with, whatever the age demographic, just bring awareness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you think it's important that young people educate themselves on the court system in America, and if so, why?
Absolutely. They they knew I knew nothing
Mm-hmm.
about the law. The only thing I knew was that my parents never taught me to, okay, fear law enforcement. I didn't come up with that teaching. So when they got me into the precinct and made it seem as if they were trying to help me, the teaching had, in a weird way, made it seem as if, okay, well, I'm helping them to help me.
Right.
So, we just didn't come up with the fear of the police. But what I will say is, learn civics, learn your rights, and this can happen. I don't think that this will happen to my particular case. Will happen to somebody the way it happened, but things can happen, and you never know what you're going to do until you're in that situation. So understand what your rights are, especially if you have listeners who are 15, 16, 17 years old. There are things that they just cannot do. There were things that they did to me that they just were not supposed to do, and had I known that they weren't supposed to do that, I may have said, look, no, I'm not going to do that. But when they isolated me from my dad, and made me seem as if that they were the only lifeline that I had. That's how things went right, and I knew nothing about law.
Yeah.
So to your young people, learn civics, learn law, learn what your rights are.
Absolutely. How would you encourage younger people like myself to get involved with organizations like the Innocence Project?
Um, you know what? Volunteer. You can volunteer, you can write. Wherever people are at, there's usually a chapter of the Innocence Project somewhere, or someone who is affiliated with the Innocence Project. Volunteering is one of the best ways to get involved with it. The reason why I was saying, volunteer and get involved is because even when I used to go to the office before I was exonerated, while it was still working on my case, and I would just go there after work sometime and just, talk to different attorneys and just the atmosphere. I learned so much. You learn about other exonerees, their cases, the circumstances of how they got to the point they got to. And, just from being around it, you just learn so much and you feel compelled to want to do something. So if you guys can find anything, volunteer. Find an Innocence Project somewhere and just volunteer.
It's great. This was an incredible conversation. I learned so much. I know everyone else did as well. Before we sign off, is there anything else you'd like to speak on or mention really quickly before we go?
Yes. One of the things I see a lot now is that there is a lot of criminal justice reform, prison reform. These things are pretty much being politicized now. People are utilizing it for whatever they're running for whatever they're trying to do, because it seems to be the sentiment that is being echoed from the people. When elections are over and everybody gets to where they want to get to, don't allow it to just be a hashtag. Continue to make it go, because there are still people, after politicians are finished with it, there's still going to be people sitting in prison. So don't allow it to stop. Don't allow it to just be a hashtag. We have to do more. We can't just stand by, so.
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect way to sign off. Thank you so much for giving us your time and your knowledge today. It is truly greatly appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Take care.
You as well.